Good morning, Chris Stirewalt, author of Whole Hog Politics. Do you have, Chris, a favorite Christmas song or carol now that we are a mere week away from Christmas? Like for me, when you look at carols, like a religious kind of a Christmas song, I'm a sucker for O Come, Emmanuel,
Oh yeah.
which has the dark, kind of brooding, all the old weird terms in it, some of the words in it. But on the secular side, on the pop music side, I would have to go, and just not thinking about this a lot, I might go with the Christmas song.
Oh
Nat
yeah.
King Cole, chestnuts roasting on an open fire, those buttery vocals of his. That might be my jam.
So the,
Uh,
the classic pairing of the Advent song, "O Come Emmanuel," and "Joy to the World," right? So I don't know how
you get the dark and also the joyful parts.
right, because I'm not a Catholic, but
Yeah.
I would describe myself as lightly liturgical. I appreciate the rhythm of the cycle, and I like the idea of Lent of Advent as a period
Advent,
of
yeah.
like small Lent. Like you're thinking about it, you're thinking about the gift you're going to receive, and "O Come Emmanuel" is an amazing song. But that combined with in the Christmas Eve service at the end to sing "Joy to the World" is pretty great.
Yeah.
It's pretty
Yeah.
great. On secular, let me recommend to you an album. I love Christmas music, but let me recommend to you Lou Rawls's Christmas album,
Ooh.
which is some of it's cheesy to the point of slight camp, but he's such a good singer, and a lot of it's standards. A couple of them aren't, and it's really, really good. I recommend it very highly.
Lou Rawls. I
Lou
always
Rawls.
like Lou Rawls. Haven't heard him in many, many moons. Hey, Chris, we have a lot to get to today, from President Trump's big primetime speech to Susie Wiles' media misadventures to Jasmine Crockett in the Texas Senate race to the healthcare question. Are we going to get the subsidies, or are we going to get a lump of coal in our stockings? But before we do that, Chris, I'm fascinated by one political story. And by the way, my name is Bill Sammon. I am joined by my old pal, Chris Stirewalt, who's the author of Whole Hog Politics, which appears every week in thehill.com. And you can get it for free by clicking on the, not clicking on it, but I guess putting your phone on your screen to see the QR code right now.
That's it. That's what you're looking for.
Yes,
Scan the
yes.
QR code.
One of these days, we're going to think of a pretext to say smash that like button, because apparently
that
everybody on YouTube says that.
Exactly.
But I'm fascinated, Chris, by the Marco Rubio J.D. Vance thing.
Yeah.
And there was a quote that emerged this week from Marco Rubio, and let me read it to you. It says, "If J.D. Vance runs for president, he's going to be our nominee, and I'll be one of the first people to support him." So my question, Chris, is what do you make of that quote? I mean, because we've been watching Marco Rubio, who started running for president a decade ago. He clearly wants to be president. So why would he say something like that? And I have my own theories, but I want to get yours.
Well, JD Vance is a very sharp-elbowed player. He is carefully, aggressively, constantly thinking about what his potential rivals for 2028 will be like. There's him and Glenn, his dealings with Glenn Youngkin. We can look at other people. So JD Vance takes no potential threat for granted, right? And he has used the position of the vice presidency to ever more firmly establish himself as the Dauphin of the Republican Party, that he is the guy and that there are consequences for people who mess with him. So if I'm Marco Rubio, here's what I figure. If Donald Trump has a successful presidency and he is at 90% approval among Republicans at the end of 2027, I'm not going to bother having a fight with JD Vance anyway, right? What would the point be? You can be Bob Dole fighting with George H.W. Bush. You can be Bill Bradley fighting with Al Gore. But if you have a president who's popular in the party and that president is given the imprimatur to his vice president, what's the fun in that? Conversely, if you're Marco Rubio and everything goes sideways, right? Who is the best choice for somebody who might be able to rebuild some sort of coalition in the Republican Party? Rubio, right? If he serves with self-abnegation is strong, but not too strong. If he has allowed himself to substantially be a vessel for the will of Donald Trump and has allayed the concerns that people had about Rubio's former ambitions when he fought with Trump. And if this gets to the end and it's a disaster and Trump has numbers then like he does now, Rubio's a very reasonable person for Republicans to turn to try to build some sort of a coalition. So I think it's an acceptance of reality.
Yeah, I agree with that. I might put a slightly different twist on it. I agree in the sense that Rubio is looking at this now. He obviously wants to be president. He wanted to be president in 2016. He was pushed aside by Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, we tend to sort of not think about this, but Trump has been the nominee, obviously, for 3 cycles. Okay, so he's cleared the field for 3 long cycles. That's 12 years where no other Republican really has had a reasonable chance of becoming the nominee, right? And so Rubio doesn't want to wait another cycle, a 4th cycle, or maybe even a 5th. If, let's say, if J.D. Vance were successful and got elected, you would presume that he would run for re-election. Now you're talking about decades. You're talking about 20 years for Rubio to wait his turn. But on the other hand, he's looking at this and he's making a calculation that, I think it's Vance's to lose. But, sometimes it's not a bad thing to be the number 2 guy when there's a lot of rough sledding ahead. Like this, right. You want to be, you don't want to be the guy sticking your head up out of the foxhole for a couple of years where a lot of political arrows can come your way and things can go sideways. I think it might be better for Rubio to say, look, J.D. Vance is either going to falter or he's not going to falter in his bid for the nomination.
Right.
If he falters, I'm there to pick up the pieces and to swoop in and try to make myself the nominee. And by the way, I will not have the baggage of having gone into a frontal assault against
right.
J.D. Vance, which is only going to make MAGA angrier at Rubio. And of course, they're skeptical of him to begin with, to put it mildly. So there's no sense. And by the way, he learned that lesson in 2015 and 2016. If you remember, Chris, and you were there with me as we put on those debates in Cleveland and Iowa and elsewhere. And remember, for so long, Rubio was the most formidable Republican contender for that nomination for a long time. He was the guy that the other Republicans feared the most. And he was done in, not by Democrats. He was done in by not just Trump, but all of the Republicans that saw him as their biggest rival and as their biggest threat. And they all sort of, ganged up on him.
Jeb Bush.
And Jeb Bush.
Jeb Bush. Marco Rubio's candidacy was a dagger pointed at the heart of Jeb Bush, and Jeb Bush knew it. And so rather than contend with Donald Trump, Jeb Bush poured $60 million on Marco Rubio's head.
Yes,
and
that's right. Rubio. So much money.
When we look back on the history of how things got so weird in American politics, a lot of it goes back to the Jeb Bush 2016 presidential campaign and what went wrong. What you are forgetting in your calculus, however, is Alan Dershowitz. And I maintain and have maintained that there is no way that Donald Trump is going to let the Republican nominating process go off without, at a minimum, making the contenders take a position on his eligibility for a 3rd term. And I predict, and so the Wall Street Journal reports, because Alan Dershowitz told him, that Dershowitz who you would call disgraced, but like, what does that even mean in
In
Washington
2025,
anymore?
that's
Yeah.
there's a lot of levels of disgrace.
Yeah, what even is that anymore? But Alan Dershowitz, who I believe was Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, went and had a meeting with Donald Trump where he presented Donald Trump with the manuscript of his forthcoming book that is dedicated to the question of whether or not Donald Trump can run for a third term. And Trump has gone back and forth. Can run, can't run. I'm not gonna do it. In that Vanity Fair piece you mentioned, Susie Wiles, like, oh, he knows he can't. And I say to all of that, hogwash. At a minimum, Donald Trump is going to make J.D. Vance at least, and presumably others, say, well, I certainly hope that the president runs for another term because we can't do without him. And I am joining the lawsuit to get him eligible and on the ballot and to challenge the 25th Amendment and blah, 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 and make them go through all of that, during which time either Trump will be the nominee for another term and presumably be savagely defeated in a general election, one would think, given American proclivities against, of course, you never know who the Democrats would pick. They might do even worse. But if Trump freezes the field to a certain degree, right? And this is the thing that Republicans are not, I don't think, adequately putting into their calculus. Trump will have an effect at some point of freezing the field and making everybody step back. So one of the things that Rubio is doing in this is saying, I'm not getting ahead of myself. I'm not pushing in there. Let J.D. Vance be the guy who is the first one at the trough. Let him push in there. Let him create, because every time Donald Trump looks at J.D. Vance, he sees a guy who is there to be his replacement. That's what he sees when he sees J.D. Vance, and they're doing fine. It all seems okay. J.D. Vance is so ambitious and so present.
Thirsty.
He's so thirsty. At some point, that's got to be a problem for Donald Trump, who does not play well with others. So
well, you're exactly right, and not only will Trump be, wanting everybody to say that he's entitled to a third term, but I also think, like, just the question of Trump giving his imprimatur to one or another of these of his successors, his would-be successors, right? The presumption is that, well, okay, J.D. Vance is his vice president. He obviously picked J.D. Vance to be his vice president, not Marco Rubio or anyone else. So it stands to reason that J.D. Vance would be the guy that gets Trump's blessing. But Trump is so strange in many ways, but in this way also, in that any sharing of the spotlight, any magnanimity in terms of, well, I've had my turn, now let's see that the next generation has their turn. It's just so hard to imagine. And also, you could certainly imagine a scenario where he wants to switch it up and say, actually, maybe it's Marco.
Or maybe
just
they
to mess
should fight
with
like
things.
scorpions in a bottle, right?
Well,
And
yeah.
maybe like Warner Brothers. It should be, who will please me the most? Which one of you will please me the most? And among this field, and then one day he'll say, "Oh, I'm hearing about so and so that is going to run, and maybe they're good. I don't know." And so he'll make a drama. Layered drama that will unfold as reality television over months for Republicans.
And he started that when he said, I'd like, when he talked about these two as possible, like a team, Marco and JD, it's be tough to beat those two. I don't, and I don't even know whether he said who would be on the top of the ticket and who would be at the bottom of the ticket. So, scorpions in a bottle. You're exactly right. Yeah. So, and the other thing is, last thing I'll say on this is that, we all saw Trump really brutally, put that nail in the coffin of Marco back in 2015, 2016.
Chris.
And, Well, Chris Christie, I was going to say, when we talk about the Republicans that were responsible for Marco's demise, it wasn't just Jeb, but Chris Christie in that one debate really
That was the coup de grace. That was the coup de grace.
Yeah, but I just think that it's possible that so he's had that absolute knockdown fight with Marco Rubio in a way that he hasn't with J.D. Vance. Now, obviously, J.D. Vance once opposed Trump and so on and so forth, but they didn't compete for the presidency together the way Rubio and Trump have. And my point is that, I think Trump has now come to a very different place with Marco Rubio. I think he actually genuinely values the guy like he's one of the guys in the room.
And he gets and he is
and he gets a lot of stuff done.
He is coalitional. So J.D. Vance was what choosing J.D. Vance for Donald Trump was for Elon Musk. It was for Peter Thiel,
Donald Trump Jr.
For Don for Tucker Carlson, for the tech bro, Bronze Age pervert enthusiast, alt-righty, the new right, whatever the term is, for the sort of nationalist right. Because what J.D. Vance did was, while other Republicans were trying to suck up to Trump directly, Vance drove around and sucked up to the people who were ascendant in Trump's orbit.
Yeah,
and
right.
He went around, and he came out of the tech alt-right universe kind of stuff in Silicon Valley. He had that background, and that's where he went, right? So he went to the sort of Claremont Institute, all the way there, so that when Trump was looking for what he needed to win the election, J.D. Vance represented this huge source of revenue, right? This massive font of online support, but also just millions and hundreds of millions of dollars that would pour in. And those people wanted Vance there as a sort of a safeguard, a minder. And Marco Rubio, on the other hand, took the more direct path of, you beat me, I will now bend the knee. You beat me, and now, so it's a much more traditional thing. What's different now is that Donald Trump, who has a frustrated legislative agenda and is having a difficult time in Washington, where Republicans are increasingly unwilling to go along with him and are increasingly doing their own thing. Marco Rubio, if you remember what happened around the most recent effort at a Russia-Ukraine truce, that Marco Rubio gave a briefing to his fellow former senators, and said, yeah, I know you've seen the thing. It's just a Russian starting point. It's not the position of the United States. Don't worry about it. And then he reversed himself, and the White House said, that's not true, and he didn't say that. But Mike Rounds doesn't strike me as a guy who would spin that out of whole cloth. I think that speaks to the utility, but also the threat of Marco Rubio, which is the utility is he's somebody who Republicans who are ready for MAGA to be waning rather than waxing. He has credibility with those people, which makes him useful in Washington, especially in the intelligence community, especially on NatSec stuff like Venezuela and these other things. So Rubio has utility now that Vance does not. How will that be a year from now? Lord only knows.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, since we're talking about primary rivalries that are going to be shaping up, let's talk for a minute about the Texas Senate race, specifically on the Democratic side. Recently, we saw Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett jump in, and let me see if I have the sort of narrative correct here. So, for many years, Democrats have been saying, "Oh, might be the year where maybe we could turn Texas purple or blue or whatever," and it never quite happens. We've seen Beto and others. And this time around, they got this guy, James Tallarico, who's a state legislator, who they were very big on. He was a rising star, a darling of the media, and he was like he's the kind of guy that could appeal to
No.
even moderate Texans because
No.
he's trying to be a minister and he's very godly and all this kind of stuff. So, and in a general election, he would have the better chance,
No.
a pretty good chance of beating
Strong
whether it's
disagreement.
Paxton or Cornyn. Okay, but this is the thinking. Then along comes Jasmine Crockett, this flamethrower from Congress, and she jumps into the race. And the conventional wisdom is as follows: Jasmine Crockett will now ruin Democrats' chances because she'll probably soak up a lot of energy in the primary, and a lot of the leftists will come out and vote for her, and then she'll go on to lose in the general.
Okay.
Let me just read one quote
All right.
from James Carville when Jasmine Crockett jumped into the race. James Carville said, quote, "She violates the first rule of politics, and that is, in politics, you always make it about the voters and never about yourself. If you listen to her talk, it's a lot more about herself than it is about the voters," end quote. Chris, what say you?
Okay, so the empirically correct choice for Texas Democrats was former Congressman Colin Allred, who got in the race early. He had run against Ted Cruz, did not win, obviously, but ran a good campaign. And in a better year, like the one that Democrats are looking to have in 2026, could be very competitive. Could particularly be competitive if Texas Republicans lose their mind and pick Ken Paxton as their Senate nominee. So
Right.
you take a race
The
with
Attorney General of Texas.
you take a race with Colin Allred, a moderate Democrat who emphasizes bipartisan cooperation. He's a football star, former football star, a district in the right part of the state, high name ID. This is a guy who can beat Ken Paxton. Progressives were like, yeah, but he's so, we don't like him. He's so.
And he got out to make room for Jasmine Crockett.
So
she
no.
sort of squeezed him out.
But the next step is James Tellerico, who is a state senator, who is not a moderate, but is a progressive's idea. It's a Graham Plattner kind of situation.
Yes.
This is like Tellerico's very progressive.
But in terms of his demeanor and the look and feel and
like
all that,
surely
the vibes.
this is what rednecks would like, thought Democrats.
Yeah.
He's a Christian. this is the Tim Waltz
the
problem.
rubes, what they would like. Yeah.
This is the Tim Waltz problem, where it's like that was a progressive's idea of a moderate, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, that's not right. You're missing it. So Tellerico catches fire. And it is an indictment of how Allred's candidacy is going, because it was like, well, what about this 12-year-old? And so Allred was not having the success early that he should have. Once Crockett said that she was going to get in the race, Allred says, I'm not going to. Now, she probably improved his chances slightly because the progressive vote would be split between Crockett, who presumably will get a lot of the black vote in Texas, and Tellerico.
And Tellerico get
who would
a lot
get
of the Hispanic or
no. Who would
or
get
the white vote?
Yeah, who would get the
younger white vote?
The matcha latte community, and that so the white progressives versus black progressives, and that Allred might have a chance to slip through. But he very reasonably concluded that two things were likely: that Crockett would win, or three things. Crockett would win. The primary would be so damaging that it might hurt his future chances at anything. And number three, that Ken Paxton doesn't look like he's going to win that primary on the Republican side. So the situation in Texas has been a real roller coaster ride this year. You go from, Republicans look like they're going to nominate a guy who will really struggle in the general election in Ken Paxton. And the Democrats have a saleable mainstream candidate. And
that's been reversed.
This could be a flip. Has gone now to Cornyn. You can see the path for Cornyn, right? Because there's another MAGA candidate in the race, which will split the vote. The congressman it's Wesley Hunt, who will split up some of that vote that actually helps Cornyn. And Paxton is not a good candidate. He's not a good, as we say, retail politician. And so Cornyn's chances seem to have improved. Meanwhile, Democrats have alit on, or are in the process of alighting on, a controversialist, as you said, a flamethrower, and a solipsistic kind of politician. Yeah. And
well, when she announced to reinforce Carville's point, I went back and looked at her announcement. She said something about. She said, "I need a bigger voice." She didn't say you voters need a bigger voice. She said, "I need a bigger voice.
Give me a bigger voice." And at some point, she said something that was like that. What we need is more of me. And I thought, that's not super. You probably don't want that. So, but now let's take the next furlong. Now the race may change, and who knows what will happen to Cornyn, and who's no there is no bottom. But let's take the likely scenario. If Cornyn is the Republican nominee and Crockett is the Democratic nominee, if you are a Democrat, what you must fervently hope is that the first poll in that race shows her down 35 points. You want that to be a sucking chest wound that can immediately be written off, and that she can be marginalized, and that other Democrats in Texas and outside of Texas can say, well, that's too bad, and shove her away. Because the worst case scenario for Democrats is that it's close enough that cash starts flowing into Texas.
Yeah, they have to invest in it.
Republicans would love for Jasmine Crockett to be the face of the Democratic Party in the midterms.
Totally.
Jasmine Crockett would love for Jasmine Crockett to be the face of the Democratic Party in midterms. So if you look at the map and you say, if they Todd Aiken her, right? If the Republicans Todd Aiken her and say they're all like this, that means that Democrats like Sherrod Brown in Ohio, like whomever the Democrats nominate in Iowa. Look at Florida. Like in a world where Jasmine Crockett isn't part of the conversation, you say, okay, well, Texas probably is coming off the table in a Cornyn Crockett matchup. But look at all these other places where the deltas are, the margins are close enough that if Democrats really are overperforming 13 points, Republicans would have to they'd have to take seriously a threat in Florida with the right candidate. They have to take seriously Sherrod Brown in Ohio. They have to look at that open seat in Iowa. There's a bunch of other places where they have to look. But if Crockett gets her way and becomes the voice and face of the Democratic Party, those things become much less likely because she is outside of her own base, a wholly unappealing figure.
Yeah, it's like they used to say Nancy Pelosi was the face of the Democratic Party or others. Chris, why did Susie Wiles agree to talk to Vanity Fair for 11 months? Obviously, there was a big interview that this is the White House Chief of Staff, and she said a lot of things that people were, clutching their pearls over. Although when you read the articles, it contextualizes it a little bit more than the supercut that you get when you read the first paragraph.
So Chris,
go ahead.
Well, Chris Whipple, the author, didn't come and say, I'm writing this for Vanity Fair. He said, I'm working on a book. And Whipple...
I've done that old dodge before, but go ahead.
Whipple...
They talk more when you do that.
Whipple is... I don't know what I have no idea if he has any politics at all, but it's not like his other writings would hardly make him a suspect as a left mole or something.
Well, he wrote a book on the White House Chiefs of Staff.
Yeah.
Right. So that might have appealed to her.
Exactly. And then he, as Whipple tells it, went to I assume it was Wiles, whom he interviewed 11 times, and said, hey, good news. Vanity Fair is interested in a write-up on this from me. I don't know whether as an excerpt or a précis on a coming book or whatever else. And they said, great, this is fantastic. But the error in judgment was, because, you can't stop it. The error in judgment was they let the photographer have access. And those pictures are brutal. They are the most grisly. They look like criminal defendants, ashen,
Yeah.
the
And that was intentional.
oh my gosh, the mottled lips, just grim. And Vanity Fair was like, oh, good. Okay, we'll do the story with Whipple. And we'd love to photograph you for Vanity Fair. And when they agreed to do it, and this is how short political life is. If you were to talk to members of the Trump administration in June, let's say, they would say, we've done it. It's amazing. We've reordered the political world, and the wind is at our back. We are winning in court. We are we're crushing the resistance. We got Pete Hegseth is the Secretary of Defense, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is Secretary of DBA, Secretary of Defense, DBA, Secretary of War. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. We got everything that we wanted. We will continue to get everything, and we are burning it up. If you went and talked to those same people 6 months later, and you know this because you have used this trick in your life, a conversation that you have with a writer when you're feeling good, and then
looks a whole lot different.
6 months later, you read and you're like, ugh.
It looks like hubris.
Right. I wish I wouldn't have said that, because gravity asserts itself. When Donald Trump was at the only period in his presidency thus far where he had a net positive approval rating, that was one thing. When he's declined 25 points since then, it's a different thing. And I think this strikes me. I've heard a lot of conspiracy theorizing about this, that, and the other thing. I think Occam's razor tells me that Whipple was recommended. And as you say, when you read the article, it's not a hit piece, right? It's not a burn job. That Whipple.
She's just sort of colorful in her
and she's
language
loose
and descriptive, and she's a little loose, you know.
And
she talks about, like, the quote. One of the quotes that got, one of the snippets that got a lot of attention is that Trump has the personality of an alcoholic, and everyone gasped. But you read it, she talks about how her dad, Pat Summerall, the broadcaster, was an alcoholic, and how. She talks about how there's a certain personality. There's a kind of a bigger than life personality with alcoholics, and by the way, Trump doesn't drink, never has. Right. He's a teetotaler. So when you kind of look at the context, it's not that terrible.
Did you hear what he said? What he got hot mic'd saying after his address to the nation?
With Susie Wiles, she said, you kept it to 20 minutes right on the nose, just like I told you. Or no, he said to her, I kept it to 20 minutes, just like was that what you're referring to, or something else? And
that it was her fault, basically, right? Like that speech, which felt like
rushed.
It felt rushed and felt like he was doing a cable ad for an electronics store somewhere. It had a like racing through it and fighting with himself, and that it's so. What I see in Susie Wiles is a person who's not worried, and that she's okay when her number's up, right?
Yeah.
That, like, at some point, and who would want to be White House Chief of Staff for any president for more than a year? But certainly with Donald Trump, she's the longest serving White House chief. She has to already be, because he was going through them like
to John Kelly or right. I don't know who else it was that didn't last. Reince Priebus. Was Reince Priebus?
Mick Mulvaney. Kelly hung in there for a long time, but I don't know. Wiles just strikes me as somebody who is too old to care too much about the shibboleths of Trump patootie kissing and having Mar-a-Lago face and doing all of that stuff. And I assume that's what Trump has liked about her, because she's one of the few people in his orbit that seems like a whole person in his presence, as opposed to just a courtier. And I assume that has worked in her favor. On the matter of that speech, it was not a well-delivered speech. This is true. It was rushed. And the content, if you were an independent, persuadable voter, you did not hear anything in that speech that made you say, you know what? Gosh darn it. This is a guy with 15% approval on his handling of the economy with independent voters. So no persuadable voters were like, oh, yeah, now that you put it that way, I guess I'm okay. But I think it did serve a valuable purpose for the president, which is his problem is that Republicans are jumping ship. Indiana, the Indiana State Senate refusing to go along, discharge petitions in the House. There is a whiff of rebellion. There is a whiff.
Some hairline fractures, some
Yes.
hairline cracks in the foundation.
And it's around. And this health insurance stuff is a huge problem. And it points to the divisions within the party. So I think what the purpose of that speech was, and I was surprised he did it. I thought he should have had an announcement to say something that he was announcing, not just Joe Biden sucks. Like, we're familiar with your
the military bonuses.
Yeah. Oh, well, he did have the military bonuses, but that's not an address to the nation for giving $1,700, $1,800 as a bonus to the members of the military. Isn't we need a primetime address to you?
Right.
We need to interrupt.
That was a fig leaf
we need to interrupt Survivor so that I can tell everybody.
I'll tell you about a payroll adjustment.
A payroll adjustment that we're doing. I think the purpose was to say to Republicans who are getting ouchy. We talked, I think it was last week, about the 58 or 59% approval rating the president has among Republicans on healthcare.
Yeah.
To say to Republicans, you shut up, right? Don't forget what I've done for you. Don't forget the mass deportation.
That's what it felt like. Yeah, you shut up.
You shut up. I don't want to hear it from you people. And next year, the tax cuts are going to kick in, and we're going to come up with something on healthcare, and it's all going to work out. And I didn't bring you here so that you could mouth off to me. So you be quiet. and you remember the good I've done for you.
Speaking of healthcare, and we'll end it on this. And again, let me try to just shorthand it. The House yesterday passed a healthcare measure that does not include any extension of the Obamacare subsidies, but it looks like because of this discharge petition that you mentioned that is mostly backed by Democrats, but there was a number of Republicans that also signed on to it, we are now going to have a vote in early January, or early to mid-January, on the very question of whether to extend the Obamacare subsidies for, I think, 3 years or whatever. So that's going to come to a vote. And my guess is that it probably pass, but then becomes the question of the Senate. And then it goes to Thune. And by the way, if it does pass the House, that changes the dynamics. It changes the facts on the ground. It changes the calculus for John Thune and the Senate, which has been able to sort of turn this aside previously. They may have to then say, well, maybe we do. And I guess all of this, Chris, to put it in real terms, we may see. It looks like we're definitely going to see at least a bump in the premiums in early January. But then if depending on whether the Republicans can pass this, it might be short-lived, and that political liability might go away, or what? What's your take?
Well, I think it increasingly likely that there will be a patch, right? And the discharge petition in the House is the credible threat. There's a vote coming. Yes, it will have to be retroactive because the new schedule starts on January 1st. So yes, it will have to be retroactive, but it will happen. And it's a 3-year extension, which if it does pass the House, which obviously it has the support to do because it got enough signatures. If that goes to the Senate, I mean, look at how many Republicans joined with the Democrats on their bill. They do not wish, Republicans most assuredly, do not wish to vote in an election year. Like, absolutely not. Just to be as clear as possible, we are against this nominally bipartisan legislation. And I just want to reiterate for people why this is such a political house fire. 20 million or 22 million people is a lot of people. This is true. And people keep throwing that around. Look at where those people are and look at who those people are. What's the state with the largest number of these folks? It's Florida. Why is that true? Because those are early retirees. It's like 4.2 million people or something in Florida who are going to get zapped. And when we say zapped,
waiting for the 65 so the Medicare kicks in.
And those people are likely voters. Those are very, very likely voters. These are, if we're talking about people 55 to 65, these are high propensity voters, and they're using Obamacare to bridge the gap to Medicare, and they're in the independent insurance market, and they're going to get nailed through, we should point out, no fault of their own. Republicans who are like, well, this is the Democrats' fault, blah, 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 blah. Yes, but the people who signed up for this were not like, yes, and I assume that the premiums will continue to go up at a debilitating rate and eventually bankrupt me. No. And by the way, these are not young people who can say, well, I'm going to let the insurance lapse. They have to have insurance because I know I have to have insurance because I have to go to the doctor like twice a year. I'm 50. It's the worst, right? But when you're 30, you're like, it's fine. That's beer money. I'm definitely not going to buy health insurance. So you have these people who are going to get zapped by this. This is an incredibly politically salient and powerful block of voters. And the Republicans realized belatedly, and kudos, by the way, to Democrats. The Democrats lost the shutdown. And at the beginning, it looked like they were going to lose the messaging war around the shutdown, but they managed to come together and limit their rhetorical demand to this Obamacare subsidy. First, they're like, we want this,
keep it simple,
want this, and we want this. They're like, no, actually, it's about extending these Obamacare subsidies. They picked the right one, and now the Republicans have got a hold of it. And I imagine, I will shut up by saying, I imagine this is another category where the Republicans wish it would pass, but that they wouldn't have to vote for it. They wish that it would pass without them doing it. So Thune will have a pretty wide berth for saying to his fellow Republicans,
vote your conscience.
We're gonna go lay down on this, right? We're gonna make real quiet around this thing, and if it happens to sneak past, we'll say, "Oh gosh, darn it, let's really bums us out." Moving on. Now that we've laid this aside,
I think that's looking increasingly likely. I have a feeling, if for no other reason than to just get rid of a political liability going into the midterms. It's not any more complicated than that. So I'm looking for that. I'll be watching that closely. Chris, we're out of time. What a conversation. I'm Bill Sammon, joined by my old pal, Chris Stirewalt, author of Whole Hog Politics. We will see you all next time. We hope you have a Merry Christmas on another exciting edition of Whole Hog Politics.
Merry Christmas.